Dinner was supposed to be simple. Just family, food, and polite conversation. That was what I told myself as I parked outside my mother's house, smoothing my dress and forcing a calm smile onto my face. Lenora Cross loved hosting dinners. Everything had to look perfect: fresh flowers, expensive plates, wine she barely drank. Appearances mattered more than comfort in her home. The moment I walked in, I knew who the star of the night was. My brother, Thatcher, sat at the head of the table like he owned the place. He was already talking loudly, glass in hand, while our relatives leaned in, listening like he was giving a speech. I took a seat near the end, unnoticed at first, which was fine by me. "So the Penthouse finally closed last month," Thatcher said, grinning. "Top floor. City view. Floor-to-ceiling windows. You can see the river from the bedroom." Someone whistled. Someone else clapped. Lenora beamed at him. "I always knew you'd do big things," she said proudly. "You've always had the drive." Her eyes flicked toward me. "Not everyone does." I smiled and kept eating. Thatcher went on about bonuses, investment returns, and how busy his schedule was. Every sentence was polished, rehearsed, designed to impress. Lenora filled in the gaps, adding details he didn't mention, making sure everyone understood just how successful her son was. Then she turned to me. "So, Maribel," she said sweetly, "are you still consulting?" The pause before the word made it sound small. "Yes," I said calmly. "I like my work." She laughed softly. "That's nice. But at your age, most people want something more permanent. Something to show for their life." A few relatives chuckled. I felt heat creep up my neck, but I kept my expression neutral. Lenora wasn't done. "Your brother owns a penthouse," she continued, tapping her fork against her plate. "And you're still renting that little apartment, right?" Laughter spread around the table this time. Louder. Less polite. I smiled. I always did. Smiling had become a reflex. "That's okay," Lenora added, waving her hand like she was being kind. "Not everyone is meant for big things. Some people are just comfortable staying small." More laughter. Then she leaned back in her chair and said it. "Casual. Careless. Cruel." At least Thatcher knew how to use the money his father left wisely. My fork stopped midair. The table went quiet for half a second. Then the conversation stumbled forward again. But something inside me had shifted. My heart pounded in my ears. My father's inheritance. The money I had trusted her to manage. The money she had promised was safe. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a strict mother or a proud host. I saw the truth. That dinner wasn't just a joke at my expense. It was a confession. And in that moment, as everyone laughed and passed dishes around, I understood that my life hadn't stalled by accident. It had been redirected on purpose. Growing up, I learned early where I stood in my family. Thatcher was the golden child. I was the spare. No one ever said it out loud, but it showed in 100 small ways that added up over the years. When Thatcher brought home a decent report card, it was framed and praised. When I did well, my mother would nod and say, "That's good. Keep working." If Thatcher wanted to try something new, money appeared. Tutors. Classes. Connections. When I talked about my own ideas, I was told to be realistic, to slow down, to not dream too big. "Don't set yourself up for disappointment," Lenora would say. "Some people just aren't built for pressure." She never said that to Thatcher. I remembered being 16 and telling her I wanted to start a small online business. I had researched it, planned it, even saved some money. She smiled politely and said, "Focus on school. Your brother needs support right now. You can do this later." Later never came. In college, Thatcher switched majors twice. Each time, my mother paid the fees without complaint. When I asked for help with one certification course that could help my career, she frowned and said, "You've always been independent. You'll figure it out." And I did. Over and over again. That night after the dinner, the same old feeling followed me. That tight ache in my chest I had learned to ignore. I stayed behind to help clean up, like I always did. Thatcher was already gone, his laughter still echoing in the hallway as he left. I was rinsing plates when I heard my mother's voice from the living room. I didn't mean to listen, but my name stopped me. "She takes things too personally," Lenora said quietly. Another voice replied, low and tense. "You know that money was supposed to help her." Lenora sighed. "I made a decision. Thatcher needed it more. He has potential. Maribel would have wasted it trying to prove something." My hands went cold. "She's always been emotional," Lenora continued. "And stubborn. If I hadn't stepped in, she would have failed and blamed us anyway. This way, at least one of my children is successful. There was a pause. Then she added, she'll survive. She always does. I stood frozen, my heart racing. All those years I thought my struggles were just bad luck. All the times I worked twice as hard and still fell behind. It hadn't been chance. It had been a choice. Her choice. I quietly turned off the tap, dried my hands, and walked to the guest room without making a sound. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, replaying her words again and again. For the first time, everything made sense. The comparisons. The discouragement. The way help was always just out of reach for me, but never for him. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry yet. What I felt was clarity. And once you see the truth clearly, you can never unsee it. After that night, memories I had pushed aside started coming back with painful clarity. The biggest one was the money. The inheritance my father left me when he passed away. It wasn't small. He had worked his whole life, saved carefully, and made sure both his children would be secure. That money was meant to be my foundation. I was young when he died. Lost. Overwhelmed. Lenora told me not to worry about it. She said she would take care of everything until I was ready. I trusted her. She was my mother. She said the money was safe, growing slowly, being handled wisely. Whenever I asked about it, she gave calm answers. The market isn't right yet. Long-term planning is better. You'll thank me later. I believed her because I wanted to. Because questioning her felt like betrayal. Years later, when I talked about starting my own business, that money was always part of the plan in my mind. I didn't want luxury. I wanted stability. Something that was mine. Lenora always pushed back. She said it was too risky. That I should wait. That I wasn't prepared. I thought she was being protective. Now I knew better. Piece by piece, the truth came together. Small comments I had ignored before. Dates that didn't line up. Conversations that suddenly made sense. The timing of Thatcher's first big investment. How quickly his real estate luck had started after my father died. The penthouse wasn't just a symbol of his success. It was built with my future. Lenora hadn't lost the money. She hadn't mismanaged it. She had redirected it. Quietly. Confidently. Like it was hers to decide. She chose Thatcher again. Not because he earned it, but because she believed in him more. Every joke at that dinner replayed in my mind. Every laugh. Every comparison. They weren't careless words spoken without thought. They were sharpened by knowledge. She knew exactly where that money came from. She knew what it had cost me. And she still let them laugh. I realized then that the cruelty wasn't loud. It didn't come with shouting or anger. It came wrapped in calm voices and polite smiles. It came from a mother who convinced herself she was being practical, while stealing from one child to crown the other. What hurt the most wasn't the money itself. It was the trust. The years I spent doubting myself. Thinking I wasn't capable enough, brave enough, smart enough to succeed on my own. That lie had shaped my life. Sitting alone with that truth, I felt something hard settle inside me. Not rage. Not despair. Understanding. And understanding changes everything. Because once I accepted that my setbacks were not accidents, I stopped blaming myself. And when you stop blaming yourself, you start seeing exactly who is responsible. I didn't confront her right away. I waited until the house was quiet and everyone had left. The dishes were done. The lights were low. Lenora sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I stood across from her, calm on the outside, even though my chest felt tight. I asked her one simple question. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I just asked if the money my father left for me was ever really meant for me. She looked up slowly. There was no shock on her face. No guilt. Just mild annoyance, like I had interrupted her. She sighed and said my name the way she always did when she thought I was being difficult. Then she told me the truth, as if it was common sense. Thatcher was a safer bet, she said. He knows how to handle pressure. You've always been too emotional. I waited for her to explain more. To soften it. To apologize. She didn't. She said she did what any responsible parent would do. She said she had to make a decision that would benefit the family. She said I would have struggled if she had given me that money, and she didn't want to watch me fail. In her mind, she wasn't stealing. She was managing risk. Listening to her felt strange, like watching someone talk from behind glass. This was the moment I realized she truly believed her own story. I asked her if she ever planned to tell me. She shook her head. There was no need. You're strong. You always land on your feet. That was when it hit me. She wasn't proud of my strength. She relied on it so she wouldn't have to protect me. I felt tears press behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I didn't argue. I didn't explain how wrong she was. None of that would change her mind. She had already decided who I was and what I deserved. So I did the only thing left. I stood up. I told her I understood. That word seemed to surprise her. She smiled slightly, relieved, like she thought the problem was solved. I walked toward the door. She didn't stop me. In that quiet hallway, something inside me shifted. I knew then that I would never beg for fairness again. I would never ask her to see me differently. I would stop playing the role she had written for me. Silence wasn't weakness. It was a decision. I didn't plan revenge in that moment. I didn't think about payback or justice. What I chose was control. Control over my life, my future, and my energy. If consequences came, they wouldn't come from anger. They would come from clarity. And when the time came, I wouldn't need to raise my voice. The truth would speak for me. I decided to start over on my own. I didn't announce it. I didn't ask for help. I simply began. I took a consulting job that demanded long hours and constant travel. Some days, I barely had time to eat. Nights were spent learning, planning, and building skills I had always been told were just hobbies: photography, writing, business strategy. Those hobbies became tools. Those tools became income. Slowly, steadily, I built something that was mine. I rented a small apartment, far from the flashy world my family lived in. No expensive furniture, no designer clothes, no penthouse view. Just me, a laptop, and work I could be proud of. Every small success felt huge because I had earned it, without anyone protecting me or handing me anything. Meanwhile, Thatcher continued on his path. He bought another property, a car, traveled for weekends. He never seemed to pause. My mother and the rest of the family praised him endlessly, telling anyone who would listen how lucky he was and how capable he had always been. Their pride blinded them to the reality underneath. I watched from a distance, quietly. I heard the stories through calls, occasional visits, and mutual friends. Thatcher's investments were larger, but also riskier. He borrowed money he didn't always have. He made promises that weren't solid. And yet, the family never noticed. They only saw the surface: another penthouse, another luxury car, another celebration. At work, I became known for my reliability and focus. I earned promotions quietly, without bragging, without needing to be seen. I saved carefully, invested wisely, and kept my life simple. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Every dollar I earned was proof that I could succeed without them, that I could take the hand I had been dealt and play it better than anyone expected. Evenings were quiet, sometimes lonely, but I preferred it that way. I didn't need applause or recognition from the family that had laughed at me. Every email I sent, every client call I finished, every decision I made independently built a life that didn't need their validation. Thatcher's arrogance grew. I heard about parties, vacations, and expensive dinners. The higher he climbed, the louder the praise from my mother. But each story carried hints of fragility: small delays in payments, tensions with partners, risky financial moves. The cracks were there if you knew where to look. I didn't rush. I didn't interfere. I kept building, brick by brick, skill by skill, dollar by dollar. I worked harder than I ever had before, but I did it on my terms. Quietly, independently, without anyone seeing me struggle or succeed. And while the world cheered for Thatcher, I felt a satisfaction no applause could match. I was free. I was capable. And my foundation, built with my own hands, was stronger than anything my mother or brother could ever understand. Over the next few years, I kept building my life quietly, focusing on work, saving, and learning. Meanwhile, I started hearing whispers about Thatcher's world, not from family, but through my work. Some clients mentioned changes in the market. Some reports crossed my desk that didn't seem important at first, until I looked closer. Thatcher's properties, the ones my mother bragged about, were built on risky loans and assumptions that didn't hold anymore. Deals depended on interest rates staying low and tenants paying on time. But rates were rising. The market was shifting. Some properties were harder to rent. Costs were going up. I noticed small cracks, things Thatcher likely ignored, because no one ever challenged him. I realized something strange. I had knowledge now that could affect him. Not insider secrets, not tricks, just facts. Facts about rules, regulations, and market trends that could change the value of his investments. If the numbers shifted as I expected, his empire could start wobbling, slowly at first, then fast. I didn't feel joy. I didn't want revenge yet. I simply observed. I watched the family continue to praise him, oblivious to the tension beneath the surface. My mother would call, asking about me, bragging about Thatcher, unaware that the foundation of his success was weakening. The cracks weren't obvious to most people. A family member might notice a delayed payment or a small argument with a partner, but nothing that screamed disaster. To me, though, the signs were clear. The loans stacked up. The luxury expenses weren't sustainable. Every decision Thatcher made relied on assumptions that were now shaky. I remembered the inheritance, my own stolen opportunity, and how my mother had always favored him. The unfairness of it had shaped me, forced me to work harder and smarter. Now, I had the tools and the knowledge to make sure the truth mattered, that the world I had been denied could shift without me needing to beg or argue. I never contacted him or my mother about any of it. I didn't gossip. I didn't warn anyone. I kept building my own stability while quietly watching the cracks grow in theirs. I knew it wouldn't happen overnight, and I didn't rush. It was enough to know I had power now. Power that came from clarity, preparation, and patience. For the first time, I felt the balance shifting. Not because I wanted to punish them, but because the world always corrects itself in time. And this time I was ready. I was not standing on the sidelines anymore. I was ready to let the facts speak, to let life reveal what happens when arrogance meets reality. I continued my work, my hours long and exhausting, but my mind was calm. I understood now that strength wasn't about shouting or proving yourself. It was about building quietly, knowing the cracks were there, and waiting for the moment they could no longer be ignored. A few months later, I received an invitation to another family gathering. Lenora called it a celebration for Thatcher's latest investment, a property he had bought downtown. I hesitated when I saw the invitation. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I knew attending quietly, watching, and understanding was more important than avoiding them. When I arrived, the house looked the same. Perfectly arranged flowers, polished silverware, and Lenora smiling as if nothing had ever happened. Thatcher was there too, already talking to relatives about his expansion, his voice full of pride. I stepped inside calmly, taking a deep breath, reminding myself that I had changed since the last dinner. I was more confident now. I wasn't the small, anxious daughter she had mocked before. I sat quietly, letting them notice me but not reacting to anything. I listened as Thatcher bragged about how many units he had purchased, the returns he expected, and how everything was falling into place. Lenora beamed, nodding at each point, clearly proud. I watched the guests, noting the polite nods and smiles. Everyone was impressed, but I noticed something deeper beneath the surface. During the evening, Lenora made a few comments that seemed innocent at first. "It's nice Maribel could join us tonight," she said, smiling. "I know how busy you've been." But there was an edge to it, a reminder that she expected something from me. Later, Thatcher leaned close when I passed by and said, "If you ever want to help with this, you know where to reach me." Just a casual line, but I knew what it meant. They assumed I would be a backup if anything went wrong. Everywhere I looked, I saw the same pattern repeating. My family celebrated Thatcher loudly, while quietly reminding me of my place. They expected me to be polite, supportive, maybe even provide financial help if needed, all without being asked. It wasn't direct, not like before, but the message was clear. I realized I didn't feel the usual pressure or anger this time. Instead, I felt steady and aware. I was observing, understanding, and taking mental notes. This wasn't just another family gathering. It was a test. Lenora and Thatcher were expecting me to fall back into my old role. The dutiful, quiet daughter, the emotional safety net. I finished my drink and smiled politely at Lenora. I answered questions with calm confidence. I didn't apologize for my life or explain my choices. I stayed quiet where it mattered, but internally, I was mapping out my next steps. By the end of the evening, I understood something clearly. I didn't need to fight or argue. I didn't need to prove myself. I simply needed to recognize the patterns, stay patient, and let the consequences unfold naturally. This was my moment to prepare, and I was ready. For the first time at a family gathering like this, I left feeling calm, collected, and in control. I wasn't just a guest. I was someone who knew the rules and was ready to change the game. That night, the dinner started like any other. Lenora was smiling, Thatcher was bragging, and the relatives were politely listening. I sat quietly, observing, as I had learned to do. For a moment, it felt normal. But then Lenora made the comparison again. Her words were gentle, almost casual, but sharp enough to remind everyone of the old story, how I had fallen behind while Thatcher succeeded. I took a breath. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the need to cry. I felt steady. For the first time, I realized I could speak without emotion, without yelling, without making a scene. I could let the truth do the work. I think it's time to clarify something, I said, my voice calm. About the money my father left me. About what happened after he passed. All eyes turned toward me. Lenora raised an eyebrow, surprised. Thatcher paused mid-sentence, clearly unsure of what I was about to say. I trusted that inheritance to be managed for me, I continued. It was meant to help me start my own life, my own business. That money was supposed to give me security. Instead, most of it went into your investments, Thatcher. Your penthouse, your deals, the properties we all hear about, they were funded with what should have been mine. The room went quiet. Murmurs stopped. Forks hovered in midair. My relatives looked at me, then at Lenora, then at Thatcher, trying to process the words. I'm not angry, I said. I'm just stating facts. The legal documents, the transfers, they're all there. Everything can be verified. The money was mine. It was misused. And right now, the investments that seem so strong, they're fragile. Loans are stacked. Risks are high. What looks like success is built on assumptions that can fail at any time. I paused, letting the words sink in. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to attack anyone personally. Clarity was enough. Lenora's face changed. For a second, her confident mask slipped. Thatcher's smile vanished. I could see the first flickers of panic as reality hit them. The relatives looked at each other, their eyes wide. They were realizing that the penthouse, the properties, all the celebrations, they were built on my stolen future. I kept speaking slowly, methodically. I didn't accuse. I didn't insult. I didn't raise my voice. I only stated what was true. The inheritance, the transfers, the mismanagement, and the shaky foundation of Thatcher's empire, all of it was fact. When I finished, the room was silent. No one moved. The weight of the truth hung in the air. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears or screaming. Just quiet understanding. For the first time, I felt a sense of control. I had spoken the truth calmly, and it hurt more than any shouting or confrontation ever could. The moment belonged to me. The power belonged to the truth. And I knew from that night forward, nothing would be the same. After that dinner, things changed quickly. I didn't need to do anything more. The facts I had laid out spoke for themselves. The room had gone silent that night, but the real effects came in the days and weeks that followed. Thatcher was the first to react. His phone calls were angry and desperate. He tried to convince me privately to fix things, to smooth over the issues, to help him get back on track. I listened politely but didn't promise a thing. He lashed out in emails, blaming everyone around him, refusing to take responsibility. But I stayed calm. I had no intention of rescuing him. Lenora played the victim. She called me, her voice trembling, trying to convince me that she had only done what any mother would do. She painted herself as someone caught between two children, forced to make hard decisions. She begged, she reasoned, she pleaded, but I could see clearly now. She had made her choice years ago, and now she was facing the consequences. Family members started to distance themselves. Some stopped visiting. Some whispered when I walked into the room. I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I was simply observing as the reality of their decisions sank in. People who once admired Thatcher's confidence began to notice cracks in his success. Deals that seemed solid started to fall apart. Loans were called in. Investors hesitated. Every move he had made depended on assumptions that were no longer true. The financial collapse wasn't dramatic in the sense of chaos or shouting. It was slow, precise, and inevitable. I stayed out of it completely. I didn't interfere. I didn't make calls. I didn't give advice. I simply let events unfold. For the first time, Lenora experienced what it was like to watch one child thrive while the other struggled. She had spent years favoring Thatcher, thinking she was protecting him and shaping his future. Now she saw that her actions had consequences. The security she had built for him depended on misused funds, risky loans, and unstable investments. And without me stepping in to cover gaps, the structure began to crumble. Thatcher's frustration turned into panic. Lenora's calm demeanor cracked. Even relatives who had previously supported them started asking questions, noticing the tension and pulling away. Trust evaporated quickly. The relationships that had seemed solid for years were suddenly fragile. I felt a strange sense of peace watching it happen. I didn't celebrate, I didn't gloat. I simply recognized the natural order of cause and effect. Their choices had led them here, and I was no longer part of their safety net. For years, I had been expected to support them emotionally, financially, and quietly. That night, and in the weeks afterward, I simply refused. My independence, my clarity, and my refusal to rescue them were enough to show them the real cost of favoritism. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need revenge through action. Their scramble, their stress, their collapse, it was happening because of the truths I had calmly spoken. And I stayed steady, knowing I had done nothing wrong. The power of inaction, of refusing to prop them up, was the strongest lesson they had ever received. By the time things settled, my life had changed completely. I didn't have a penthouse, flashy cars, or a name that impressed anyone. What I had was freedom, stability, and control over my own future. I lived modestly, but every choice I made was mine. No one dictated my schedule, my career, or my dreams. That freedom felt heavier and more valuable than any luxury my brother could buy. Lenora reached out a few weeks later. Her voice was different, tense, unsure, almost fearful. She invited me over, trying to talk about family and healing. I listened politely, aware of the pause in her tone, the way she avoided my eyes. There was no genuine remorse in her words, only the fear of what had already started to happen. The consequences she had ignored for years were now clear, and she wanted to salvage what she could. I shook my head gently. I told her I wasn't interested in revisiting the past or pretending everything was fine. There was no anger, no yelling. I didn't need to justify myself or lecture her on fairness. I simply explained that my boundaries were clear. I would not allow anyone to control me again. I would not let past betrayals shape my life. She tried to push further, but I stayed calm. My decision wasn't about punishment or revenge. It wasn't about making her feel small. It was about protecting myself. I had spent years working quietly, building my life on my own terms, and I wasn't about to give that up for appearances or false apologies. After that conversation, I stopped worrying about her opinion. I focused entirely on the life I was creating. Each day, I grew more confident in my choices. I invested in myself, learned new skills, and surrounded myself with people who respected my independence. I didn't need validation from the family that had once laughed at me. I didn't need them to acknowledge my achievements. I only needed to know that I had built something real, with my own effort, and that it couldn't be taken away again. The truth is, my revenge wasn't loud or dramatic. I didn't ruin anyone's life. I didn't expose them publicly. My revenge came from refusing to play the role they had assigned me. I stopped shrinking myself so that they could feel taller. I stopped seeking their approval and stopped letting their choices dictate my happiness. In the end, I didn't need a penthouse to feel complete. I didn't need apologies to feel free. Living my life fully, honestly, and independently, that was enough. And that, more than anything, was the power I had always been denied.